The HSV Pathfinder emerged from hyperspace on the fringes of Zalari Prime's orbit, a sleek contrast to the lattice of angular warships stationed around the planet. Captain Mara Vasquez tightened her grip on the console as the ship's scanners pulsed, painting a detailed image of the alien fleet. The Zalari were meticulous, each vessel arranged with the precision of a predator waiting to strike. "This is definitely a bring flowers first kind of situation," muttered Zahara Lynn, their linguist and cultural analyst, as she studied the Zalari transmission data. "We should tread lightly." Dr. Elias Carter, the ship's engineer-biologist, shot her a skeptical glance. "Zahara, they've got a fleet that could turn Earth into gravel. I think we're past the light tread stage." On Mara's right, Corporal Dax Rourke, the team's wild card, leaned back in his seat, hands behind his head. "Relax. Worst case? We make history as the first humans to get vaporized by an energy-based firing squad." "Not helping, Dax," Mara said, exhaling through her nose. She pressed a button, opening a channel. "Zalari Prime Command. This is Captain Vasquez of the Pathfinder. We come in peace, representing the United Terran Confederation, requesting permission to initiate first contact protocols." Silence. The crew exchanged glances. Then, a reply crackled through the speakers, sharp, guttural syllables. Zahara's translator struggled for a moment before stabilizing into something intelligible. "Vasquez, your presence is unapproved. Turn back." Mara furrowed her brow. "We've traveled across the sector to make peaceful contact. We mean no harm." There was a pause, then a curt response. "You've been warned." The transmission cut. A dozen Zalari warships surged forward. Alarms blared as the first energy bolt streaked toward them. The Pathfinder's shields held barely. "Okay, so no tea and biscuits," Eli muttered, gripping his console as the ship rocked. Mara's mind raced. There was no fighting this fleet. Their only option was to get to the surface. Prove humanity wasn't hostile before they were swatted from the sky. "Brace yourselves," she ordered. "I'm taking us down." With a flick of her wrist, she angled the ship toward the planet, punching through the upper atmosphere in a controlled descent. The warships didn't follow. Not a good sign. Landing gone wrong. The Pathfinder set down in a stark metallic clearing, a Zalari military outpost. Judging by the angular buildings and the armored figures already converging on their position. "Exit slow, weapons holstered," Mara said, rising from her seat. They stepped onto the ramp, hands raised in a show of peace. The Zalari soldiers were tall and exoskeletal, their deep-set eyes locked onto the humans with something that went beyond hostility, fear. Then, without warning, they opened fire. A crackling pulse struck Mara square in the chest. Pain ignited through her nerves, but instead of crumpling to the ground, she staggered, gritted her teeth, and stayed standing. Dax took a hit next, letting out a string of curses, but otherwise remaining upright. Then Eli, then Zahara. The Zalari faltered, confusion flickering across their faces. No species survived direct energy blasts. Mara's mind caught up with her body. They shouldn't be alive, but they were. And then something shifted. The second volley hit, but it was duller. Less agony, more discomfort. "Our bodies," Eli gasped. "We're adjusting." Dax, breathing heavily, cracked a grin. "Okay, this is weirdly awesome." The Zalari hesitated. Mara saw it. The way their rigid posture shifted toward uncertainty. They had expected humans to drop like insects. Instead, the humans were adapting. Mara seized a moment. "Dax," she hissed. "On it." With a sudden burst of speed, Dax lunged forward, disarming the nearest Zalari before the alien could react. A second later, the human team rushed their attackers, using their growing immunity to energy fire to overpower them. Within moments, the guards lay unconscious. Zahara exhaled, wide-eyed. "I can't believe that worked." Mara didn't have time to bask in the absurdity of their situation. More Zalari would come. They needed to disappear fast. Escape into the unknown. Eli quickly analyzed one of the fallen weapons. They use plasma-based energy pulses. Our bodies must be forming a natural resistance after each exposure. Does it last? Mara asked. Not sure, but if we keep taking small doses, we might maintain it. Dax clapped his hands. So, what? We need a controlled diet of getting shot. Great. Mara turned to Zahara. Can you get into their systems? Zahara nodded, already working on a stolen Zalari data tablet. They're mobilizing forces to wipe out our ship. We need to leave. Now. Mara scanned the outpost, spotting a small Zalari reconnaissance vessel docked nearby. That's our ride. The team sprinted toward it. Alarms blared as they boarded, but Mara's piloting instincts kicked in. Within seconds, they were in the air, blasting out of the outpost just as explosions consumed the Pathfinder behind them. The loss hit like a hammer, but there was no time for grief. They were alone, stranded on a hostile world, but still standing. Mara tightened her grip on the controls. Congratulations, everyone. We've officially made first contact. She glanced at the others, each bruised but grinning in defiance, and also started an interstellar war. The stolen Zalari reconnaissance vessel shuddered as Mara pushed its thrusters to the limit, weaving between jagged canyons under the crimson sky of Zalari Prime. The Zalari military wouldn't lose them easily, but she intended to make them sweat trying. Inside the cramped cockpit, Dr. Elias Carter hunched over a console, his brow furrowed in deep concentration. Bad news, he muttered. Shocking, Dax Rourke deadpanned, checking the charge on his stolen Zalari plasma pistol. Do tell? Eli ignored him, eyes locked on monitor. They've marked us as biological anomalies. They're not just hunting us, they're studying us. Every soldier we fought had their armor cams transmitting live. Mara tightened her grip on the controls. So, what? We're a scientific curiosity. Zahara Lynn, their linguist and cultural analyst, glanced up from the alien data tablet she'd swiped. More like a cosmic nightmare. The Zalari have never encountered a species that could adjust to energy weaponry. They're afraid. Dax grinned. Good. Let's weaponize that fear. Before we get cocky, we have a problem, Eli said. He turned the tablet toward them, showing a holographic fleet formation. They're mobilizing. If we don't stop them, Earth is next. A heavy silence settled over the cabin. Then Mara spoke, her voice steel. We're stopping them, understanding the adaptation. They set the stolen craft down in a deep canyon, where jagged rock formations hid them from Zalari patrol drones. As the ship powered down, the crew gathered inside, their makeshift work council illuminated by flickering emergency lights. Eli laid out his findings. Our bodies are building a resistance curve to energy blasts. The more we get hit, the less it affects us. But the adaptation fades if we go too long without exposure. Dax raised a brow. So, what? You're saying we need to get shot at regular intervals. Small doses, Eli clarified. Too much energy at once could still be lethal, but controlled exposure strengthens the resistance. Mara exhaled. We don't have time for clinical trials. We need to use this now. Zahara pointed at the data tablet. The Zalari fleet's flagship is a central command hub. If we infiltrate it, we could disable their communications and delay the attack. Mara nodded. That's our way in. But we can't just walk onto a Zalari warship. A grin spread across Dax's face. Who says we're walking? The heist plan. They pored over stolen schematics, formulating a high-risk infiltration plan. Zahara would hack into Zalari comms, planting false security alerts to divert enemy patrols. Dax and Mara would infiltrate the docking bay, disguised as captured prisoners with Eli acting as a Zalari scientist transferring them. Once inside, they'd locate the Fleet Command Nexus, upload a virus, and disable their ability to coordinate attacks. Escape before the entire ship came down on them. Simple, Dax said, stretching his arms. What could go wrong? Eli sighed. How much time do you have for that list? Infiltrating the flagship. Under the cover of night, the stolen Zalari vessel approached the flagship's docking bay. Thanks to Zahara's interference, the hangar crew expected a prisoner transfer. Dax and Mara, bound in fake restraints, kept their heads down as Eli, now draped in a stolen Zalari uniform, led them forward. The Zalari dock officer, an imposing figure with chitinous plating, scrutinized Eli. These are the specimens. Eli nodded stiffly. Their adaptability requires further testing under high-energy conditions. Direct orders. The Zalari's mandibles twitched, skepticism. Dax cleared his throat. Beep boop. I'm an energy-absorbing death machine. Mara nearly kicked him. The dock officer scowled but waved them through. As soon as they were out of sight, Zahara's voice crackled over their stolen comms. All right, you're in. I've looped the security feeds, but don't take too long. This system learns fast. Copy that, Mara whispered. Moving, disrupting the Zalari war machine. Inside, the Zalari flagship was a monument to efficiency and intimidation. Metallic corridors pulsed with faint blue energy, and command terminals flickered with data streams. They reached the Fleet Command Nexus, a sprawling control room where holographic battle formations floated midair. Eli got to work. He plugged in the Zalari data tablet, uploading the virus designed to scramble their fleet coordination systems. Dax paced near the doorway. So, when does the part where alarms start blaring and everything goes to hell? A warning klaxon shrieked. Dax groaned. Called it. The door slammed open. Zalari guards poured in, plasma weapons raised. Mara, feeling the familiar tingle of another adaptation wave, charged first. A plasma bolt slammed into her shoulder, but instead of dropping, she barely flinched. Eli barely had time to process the science-defying moment before Dax dived into the fray, disarming the nearest guard with a brutal elbow strike. Zahara's voice was urgent over comms. You need to get out now. The fleet's command AI is rerouting systems. Our virus is only a temporary disruption. Mara grabbed Eli by the collar. Is the damage done? Eli glanced at the system readout. They're crippled for hours, maybe a day tops, long enough for Earth to prepare. Then we're leaving, Mara snapped. They fought their way back toward the hangar. The adaptation was at its peak now. Plasma shots burned less, movement was sharper, adrenaline surging like a refined weapon. They reached the stolen vessel, barely dodging a final barrage of plasma fire, and blasted out of the hangar just as more Zalari soldiers flooded the bay. A fateful revelation. As they fled into the atmosphere, Mara turned to Eli. How long does this adaptation last? Eli hesitated. It might be permanent. The more we push it, the stronger it gets. Zahara exhaled. So, we're turning into what? Superhumans. Dax grinned. I knew I was special. Mara, staring at the planet shrinking below, exhaled. Then let's put it to use. We've started something bigger than us, and we're not running from it. Eli glanced at the sensors. We might have to run for now. They just sent pursuit ships after us. Mara cracked her neck, gripping the controls. Then let's see if they can keep up. The ship shot forward. Humanity's greatest evolution now set in motion. The stolen Zalari reconnaissance vessel shook violently as pursuit ships closed in, plasma cannons lighting up the void. Mara's hands moved like instinct, weaving the ship through the debris field of a long-forgotten battle. Eli, tell me we've got something in this tin can that'll help. Eli frantically scanned the Zalari controls. We've got, let's see, one functioning plasma turret, a half-charged energy dampener, and a self-destruct that I really don't want to test. Dax leaned over his seat, grinning. I vote self-destruct. Let's take some of these guys with us. Mara shot him a glare. Not yet. Zahara interrupted. I've got an idea. sending false signals to their targeting systems. Should buy us a few seconds. A moment later, the pursuers hesitated, their weapons flickering with misfires. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Mara pushed the engines past Redline, diving toward the shadowed surface of a nearby moon. Everyone hold on. This landing's going to be rough. The ship plunged through the thin atmosphere, thrusters screaming as Mara angled it toward a jagged canyon. They hit hard, skidding across the rock before coming to a jarring stop. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Dax let out a breath. So, that was fun. Eli groaned. My ribs disagree. Zahara, still focused on her hacked Zalari data tablet, paled. Guys, we have an even bigger problem. A new threat. Mara turned, still catching her breath. Bigger than getting chased across the stars. Zahara nodded grimly. The Zalari aren't just after us. Their fleet is en route to a system called Terravon 9. It's not an Earth colony, but it's inhabited. Eli stiffened. By who? Zahara hesitated. A species called the Kaari. According to these records, the Zalari consider them rebels. But the data suggests something worse. She turned the screen, displaying horrific footage of Kaari settlements, burned-out cities, forced labor camps. They're wiping them out. A heavy silence filled the cockpit. Mara clenched her jaw. We can't let that happen. Dax gave her a look. I'm all for punching space fascists, but how? We've got a half-broken ship and a target on our backs. Eli exhaled. Maybe we don't stop them alone. Maybe we find the Kaari. Zahara nodded. If they're still fighting, they might be willing to work with us. Mara didn't hesitate. Then we find them, and we give the Zalari something to be afraid of. Finding the resistance. Zahara's hacking revealed encrypted Kaari distress signals coming from a nearby planet. A barren, storm-racked wasteland. By the time they patched up the ship and took off, Zalari patrols were already scouring the system. Stealth was their only option. Mara guided the ship low through the atmosphere, weaving through dense electrical storms. Eyes peeled. We find them fast, or we don't find them at all. Then, a proximity alarm shrieked. Eli pointed. We've got company. Through the storm, Kaari ships appeared, sleek and insectal, weapons locked onto them. A crackling voice filled the cockpit. Unidentified vessel. Power down and prepare for boarding. Dax snorted. Wow, they sound so friendly. Mara exhaled. No choice. Let's hope they're not trigger-happy. She powered down the engines, and within moments, their ship was surrounded. First impressions. The Kaari boarding team moved swiftly. Live figures clad in patchwork armor, sharp eyes filled with suspicion. They herded the humans out of the ship and into a fortified underground war camp. Inside, hundreds of Kaari bustled, repairing ships, tending to wounded, preparing for war. Their leader, Commander Velos, stepped forward, scarred, weary, and dangerous. He eyed the humans coldly. You're either brave or foolish to come here. Mara met his gaze. We're here to help. Velos scoffed. Humans, the Zalari don't even know your kind exists. Why would you fight for us? Eli spoke up. Because we're not like other species. He glanced at Mara, then pulled a Zalari plasma pistol from a nearby Kaari soldier's belt. Before anyone could stop him, he shot Dax in the chest. Gasps filled the room. Dax stumbled, but didn't fall. He exhaled sharply, rubbing the burn. Damn it, Eli. Warn a guy next time. Eli turned back to Velos. We don't die from energy weapons. We adapt. The Kaari murmured in disbelief. Velos studied Dax, then slowly nodded. Show me what you can do. Proving humanity's strength. Over the next few hours, the humans demonstrated their adaptation. Controlled exposure, increasing resistance, fighting alongside the Kaari in mock combat. Velos watched fascinated. Your species is unique. Mara stepped forward, and we're offering that uniqueness to help you fight back. Velo studied her, then turned to a holographic map of Terravon 9. The Zalari fleet arrives in 3 days. We plan to evacuate, but with your help, maybe we fight instead. Dax grinned. Now that's more like it. Velos nodded. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we plan a war. The calm before the storm. That night, the humans sat together by a flickering fire in the Kari war camp. Eli leaned back. This is insane, right? We came here to make first contact, and now we're leading a rebellion. Zahara smirked. Humans have a history of getting involved where they shouldn't. Mara exhaled. We didn't start this war, but we sure as hell are going to finish it. Dax grinned. All right, but if we're doing this, I want a cool nickname for our squad. Eli groaned. Please not the plasma punchers. Zahara rolled her eyes. How about the shock troopers? Mara smirked. Let's survive first. Then we'll name ourselves. They sat in silence, watching the Kari warriors prepare. The Kari war camp pulsed with activity. Warriors fastened armor plates, checked weapon charges, and exchanged solemn words. In the command tent, Mara, Dax, Zahara, and Eli stood over a holographic projection of Terravon 9's surface, alongside Commander Velos and his officers. The Zalari fleet would arrive within hours, outnumbered and outgunned. The only hope lay in striking hard and fast before the enemy could deploy their full force. Velos gestured toward the projection. The Zalari will land their shock troopers here, an old Kari stronghold. If they take it, we lose our best chance at resistance. Mara studied the map. Then we don't let them take it. Velos nodded. We'll divide into 3 forces. One will engage them directly, another will target their dropships, and the third, his gaze flicked to the humans, will strike their command structure. If we cut off their leadership early, the invasion could collapse before it starts. Dax cracked his knuckles. So, we go for the head of the snake? He grinned. I like it. Zahara folded her arms. How do we even get close? They'll expect resistance. Velos smirked. They'll expect Kari resistance. Mara caught his meaning immediately. But they still don't understand us. Eli's eyes widened. We let them hit us with their energy weapons. Pretend we're down. When they drag us into their command post, we get up and wreck their entire operation. Velos nodded. It's a gamble, but one worth taking. Mara turned to her crew. You all in? Dax grinned. I was in the moment we stole that first ship. Zahara smirked. If we die, I'm haunting all of you. Eli exhaled. I can't believe I'm saying this, but let's get shot on purpose. Mara nodded. Then let's make history. The first shots fired. As the Zalari fleet emerged from hyperspace, Kari artillery opened fire, filling the sky with streaks of plasma and railgun slugs. Mara's group, clad in scavenged Zalari armor, marched toward the front lines posing as captured prisoners. The battle raged around them. Kari fighters weaving through enemy fire, ground forces engaging in brutal close-quarters combat. Explosions rattled the air as Zalari dropped ships descended, unloading squads of heavily armored soldiers. Then came the first plasma shots. The heat burned against Mara's chest. But just as before, her body adjusted instantly. The pain dulled. The impact softened. Dax pretended to collapse, groaning dramatically. Oh no, he drawled. I have been fatally wounded. Curse my fragile. Mara kicked him. Stay down. Zalari troops seized them, dragging them toward their central command post, exactly as planned. Inside the beast lair, the Zalari war camp was a fortress of black metal and pulsing energy conduits. At its center, a towering command structure loomed, where officers barked orders and watched the battle unfold on hovering displays. As the humans were tossed inside, a high-ranking Zalari commander, tall, plated in obsidian armor, stalked toward them. This is the Resistance's best. His mandibles clicked in amusement. I expected more. Eli muttered, Yeah, underestimate us. It'll be funnier that way. The Zalari drew his plasma pistol and fired point blank at Mara's chest. The bolt hit. Her body absorbed the energy instantly. She didn't flinch. The Zalari's amusement vanished. Mara lunged forward, snapping her restraints and grabbing the pistol midair. Before the officer could react, she drove her fist into his face, sending him crashing through a console. Surprise, she said flatly. Dax sprang up, disarming a nearby soldier and flipping the plasma rifle around. Showtime. Zahara moved fast, locking the doors behind them, while Eli rushed to a console. I can disable their battlefield communications by the Kari time. Outside, alarms blared as guards poured in. Mara and Dax fought side by side, plasma shots grazing their skin but doing less damage with every hit. The Zalari struggled to adapt, panic creeping into their ranks. Zahara grinned. They're realizing it now. Eli slammed the final command into the console. Their entire network's fried. No orders. No reinforcements. Mara grabbed the fallen commander's emergency beacon and activated it. A deep Zalari voice crackled through the base's comms. Commander down. Command structure compromised. The panic spread like wildfire, turning the tide. Outside, the Kari resistance took advantage of the confusion. Coordinated strikes devastated Zalari positions. Ships fell from the sky, ground forces overwhelmed by sheer chaos. By the time Mara's team fought their way out, the Zalari lines were collapsing. Velos, leading the charge, met them at the front. You did it. Mara exhaled. Not yet. She pointed to the sky, where the Zalari flagship hovered. We take that ship, and this battle is over. Velos grinned. Then let's finish this. The final stand. The Kari launched a full-scale assault on the flagship, using stolen Zalari transports to breach the hull. Inside, Mara's team led the charge through the corridors, adapting to every plasma shot that hit them. Dax laughed as he fought, deflecting a shot with his forearm. I think I'm starting to like this whole energy-proof thing. They reached the ship's reactor core. Eli quickly worked, overloading the containment fields. 5 minutes and this ship is scrap. Alarms screamed. The remaining Zalari fled in terror, their belief in absolute supremacy shattered. The humans and Kari barely escaped before the flagship detonated in a massive fireball, signaling the battle's end. A new era begins. As the dust settled, the Kari forces cheered. Taravon 9 was free. Velos turned to Mara. This victory belongs to you. She shook her head. No, it belongs to all of us. Zahara smirked. So, about that squad name? Dax grinned. The adapted. Eli rolled his eyes. It's not the worst. Velos clapped a hand on Mara's shoulder. The Zalari will return. And when they do, his eyes gleamed. They'll fear humanity. Mara nodded, staring up at the stars. Let them come.